Welcome back to A Story to Tell on the campus of Dixie State University. Today we're talking with Craig Bowden, who's a candidate for U.S. Senate. Craig, how are you?
I'm doing well, Wayne. How about yourself?
Fantastic, and if I wasn't, I'd lie about it. My mother used to say, if you can't have anything else, you can have a positive attitude.
Most definitely.
Mothers are like that, you know, they try to keep you going in the right direction.
That's the truth. My mom was definitely that way as well.
Well, tell me about yourself. Who you are, where you've been, where you come from, what you want to do.
Yeah, well, I was born in Ogden, Utah, back in 1984, so that makes me the youngest in the race. I went to Ben Lomond High School. From there, decided to join the military, went into the Marine Corps. Served in the Marines for about just under 8 years. Would have done a little bit more time, but I ended up having a training accident that basically forced me out. I ended up blowing out my knee and missed the mountains of Utah. I was stationed down in Southern California where it's dry, hot, and nasty, and so wanted to get back to where some mountains and trees were. And came back, and that's where I eventually met my wife.
How did you meet her?
Coincidentally, it was through her brother. She had seen that he was struggling with some issues. He was also in the military, was exhibiting some signs of post-traumatic stress disorder, and she saw that I was friends with him, and so she just kind of messaged me one day on social media and kind of sparked a conversation from there, and helped her brother get some resources available to help him with post-traumatic stress disorder. And then we found out that we had kids that were about the same age. I was previously married a number of years before that, but so I had two little boys and she had two little boys. They were roughly the same age, so it's like, hey, let's go have a park date. You know, let the kids run around and then we can talk adult things. And from there it just grew into a really close friendship, and one day we just decided that we loved each other and we were going to go exclusive, and we were engaged a couple months after that, and then a few months after that we were married.
Do you have any children together?
We do. We actually have a daughter and a son together. We've been together now, married for about 4 years, and we have been together in total, best friends, engaged, things like that, for another 3 years, so right around 7 years we've been together.
Tell me about your family, your children.
Caleb is my oldest. He's 12 years old. He actually was just ordained as a deacon, and that was a pretty proud moment for my family. Right under him is my stepson, Brandon. He just turned 11, and he's a really special guy. He actually has autism, so he is a special needs kid. But I can tell you the brilliance behind his eyes, the autism is, you know, just a label really. He's one of the most bright, wonderful kids. After him is my son Connor, and he is 9, almost 10. And he takes more of my rambunctious personality. I'm kind of a rough and tumble person, love the outdoors, and he takes a lot after me on that, kind of interested in sports, camping, fishing, that kind of stuff. Following him is Evan, stepson, and he is 8 years old. And I would say that with him, he's got the most charismatic, you know, just magnetic personality. I mean, he'll light up a room with a smile. The very first time that I met him, he actually walked right up to me with his cheesy grin and came up and wanted me to pick him up. And, you know, he was only a year and a half, already trusted me, open arms, and that was a really cute moment there. Kenzie is our daughter. She's actually the only girl, so if there's anybody that expects to date her later on, I feel kind of bad because she's got 4 older brothers and a Marine Corps dad.
So look out.
Yep, look out if you're planning on dating her. But she's a really sweet girl. She's very outgoing, makes a friend everywhere she goes. Any restaurant we stop in, or at a gas station to get a drink or anything like that. How old is she? She is 6 now, just about to start first grade. And then after her is our youngest. He's just barely turned a year old. And he's already got quite the personality. He's very demanding. He knows what he wants, and he's just
That's
go,
the
go,
modern
go.
child. What's his name?
His name is Brigham. He's named after my grandfather.
Your grandfather was Brigham Young?
Brigham Bowden.
Okay.
We have one of those charts in our genealogy. I know that I am related to Joseph Smith and Brigham Young from, some second cousin, twice removed kind of situation, but definitely not direct descendancy.
Sounds like you've got a great family.
Oh, I love it. A lot of people think that 6 kids would be a little bit too much to handle, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I just absolutely love getting to play down on the floor some Army guys or have a tea party with my daughter, whatever have you. And they really help me remain, I guess, young at heart, because you're really only as old as you feel on the inside.
So I'm only 6 years old, huh?
Hey, that works. I'm probably right there about with you, 5, 6.
You're probably 7 or 8. Well, what do you do now for a living?
I actually do some business consulting and also do some political consulting with other candidates. I used to do the 9-to-5 kind of grind deal, call centers, all that kind of stuff. Did some security work, but I got really tired of, working for somebody else. And so I decided to take some of those leadership principles that I learned as a Marine and started teaching businesses how to apply those for their management and their senior leadership, things like that, so that they can grow their business and have kind of that, kind of camaraderie feel, make it so that it's more of a brotherhood when you're an employee as opposed to, where you're just a drone. And so I kind of try to teach those.
Enemy drones. I didn't say that.
You're
Don't
good.
tell anybody I said that.
And then during the political season, a lot of times I'll also do some advising of political candidates, especially with public speaking. I know that a lot of people, they get their nerves going a little bit with some public speaking issues. And so I like to kind of help coach them with that. And then we also help them find deals on like where to get signs, on how to interact with the media, things like that. So we do quite a bit of that during the political season, but this time I decided, since I know this kind of stuff, I'm going to go ahead and jump out on a limb and do it myself.
What about the Marines? What did you do there?
I was actually infantry. I served with 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines, stationed out in 29 Palms, California. I did 2 deployments to Iraq. We were in the Al Anbar province. First deployment was in an area around a city called Al Heat. And then we ended up fighting in Operation Vigilant Resolve, one of the major battles in Fallujah. We got tasked to go and help down there with that. And then on my 2nd deployment, we were actually deployed to Fallujah, and that was in 2004 and 2005 for those deployments.
That must have been exciting.
There were definitely some, I guess you could say, exciting moments, some hair-raising experience. It definitely kind of helped shape kind of who I am today. Just kind of knowing that if I can face this kind of stuff and come out okay, I could face anything in my life. And also, it's kind of what kind of started pushing me towards kind of a libertarian ideology as well.
Have you always been a libertarian?
I would say that I've predominantly kind of been in a more libertarian mindset, but not officially as a Libertarian Party member. I was kind of one of those, I guess you could say, Ron Paul Republicans for a while. But ultimately, when he ended up kind of defeated in 2012, that was a real eye-opener for me. And it's like, obviously, the Republican Party left me. And so I started seeking out other options. And Ron Paul was talking about this thing called libertarianism. And, I looked it up a little bit and found out there was a party that actually followed the ideology. And so I started meeting with some local libertarians, found out where they were hiding. And
They were hiding?
seems that way
hiding,
sometimes.
I just thought they were.
We started out pretty small when I first came involved with the Utah Party. And since then, we've grown quite a bit.
How many years have you been involved with them?
Since about 2013, I've been involved with the Libertarian Party. Started out just kind of as an activist, helping to man booths and things like that. And then one day they asked me to run for office myself, and so I did. And
What did you run for?
I actually challenged Rob Bishop for 1st Congressional District. And we did okay. We actually pulled some pretty decent numbers that the Libertarian Party hadn't seen before. Seemed like that was actually a pretty good year overall for Libertarians. This was back in 2016. Ultimately, we ended up getting about 16,000 votes up in 1st District, which was just under 6%. And that had never been done before, so we were pretty happy about that. And now we just like to keep that momentum going, keep growing and educating people on what libertarianism is, and have some individuals like myself and some of the other candidates we have on the slate, and get out there and teach some people and show them that there is another option.
Tell me about the other option. Why are you running for the Senate?
So one of the main reasons why I decided to run for the Senate is actually my kids. When I look at kind of the direction that we're going federally, I've seen, debt just continue to rise and rise and rise, and that's getting passed on to the next generations. And so I feel it would be kind of irresponsible for me to not do anything about it. And so that's one reason why I wanted to step up, was for my kids. And I actually also teach some primary kids in my ward, and so I'm dealing with quite a good group of young individuals, and they're the ones that are going to be having to take care of this if we don't. And so that's a real big factor. Another one on why I decided is actually kind of my Marine background. Having gone to war myself and kind of had the head scratching of, weren't we sent over here for weapons of mass destruction, being on the front lines, never finding them, it just kind of got to the point where I can't in good conscience send somebody else to go and do those kind of things unless we know for a fact that there is a threat to our country, that we're either under attack or under immediate threat. And so I'm hoping that I can help kind of be a vanguard for the future of individuals who join the Army, Marines, Air Force, or the Navy. That way they don't have to walk in my combat boots, so to speak. And the last one is there just needs to be, somebody that's not afraid to speak truth to power. We hear a lot of whitewashed language when candidates are running. They try to offer buzzwords and simple platitudes to try to electrify people, but they don't really get into the core of anything. And we need to address some of those issues that your typical politician is too afraid to address because they're afraid of losing. The reality is the Libertarian Party, we are a third party. And so we don't have anything to lose. If we win, that's amazing, that's great, but we really have nothing to lose. So to try to water down our message just to try to get, votes to win isn't really helping the American people. And so I'm able to actually use my platform to really speak that truth to power of some of the really big issues that our country is facing.
Be true to what you believe.
Mm-hmm. And you really don't have to be scared of it. A lot of Democrat and Republican candidates, they do kind of water things down a little bit because sometimes they're just too scared to call things out. And you have to be willing to call things out. Another thing that I see a lot of times with Democrat and Republicans in office is they'll be against something before they're for it, or they're for something before they're against it. And it all depends on who's on the opposing side of who's introducing it. You could take, for example, Obamacare. Republicans will sit there and say that they want it repealed, but when you really get to the history of it, it was introduced by a Republican.
Who was that?
It was Romney in Massachusetts. The program was
He
modeled.
was a Republican?
So he claims.
There was a little bit of difference in his plan than the
Yeah.
other, but they're close.
It was pretty closely modeled, and so when you really look at it, why aren't people addressing that? The other thing that you wind up with is, say, the debt ceiling. This is one of my favorite ones that we deal with. When there's a Democrat in the White House, there are Republicans in the House and Senate, they're sitting there saying, it's absolutely horrid to raise the debt ceiling, we can't raise it, it's irresponsible, we can't do it. And then On the flip side, if there's a Republican in office that's saying, hey, we need to raise the debt ceiling for whatever, now all of a sudden you have people like Harry Reid that are, sitting there saying, oh, no.
You know Harry Reid?
I do not know him personally. I know of him. But they'll start, down that road of it's irresponsible. We can't do that. That's going to affect our, the future of our kids. And to me, I'm sitting there like, well, if raising the debt ceiling is bad, why are you okay with it when your guy's in, but you'll stand against it when the other guy's in? And so there's that kind of lack of consistency. And that's another benefit of being a third party. If I am elected, I'm not beholden to that whole, partisan thing. I can say the debt ceiling is bad, whether there's a Republican in the White House or whether there's a Democrat in the White House, and I can say, you know what, we're not going to raise it. I will not vote to raise it. And so, I have that ability.
Are there any libertarian office holders now in Congress?
Currently, across the country, we have about 156 that hold office.
And state legislators?
We do have several state legislators. There's 3 up in New Hampshire, and we also have a woman by the name of Laura Ebke, who is sitting in the Nebraska legislature as a senator.
Are there any in Congress?
Right now, we don't have any that are elected nationally. So there are no national office libertarians right now, unfortunately. If Utah were to select me and give me the thumbs up come November, then I would actually be one of the very first ever elected. Assuming nobody else got elected in any other state, I would actually be the first one to go.
Well, isn't Rand Paul sort of a libertarian?
He definitely espouses some of the ideas of libertarianism, but then you also have to look at some of the things that he does, such as some of the appointment nominations that he supported. One of them, Jeff Sessions. Now, Jeff Sessions has been doing a lot of crackdown kind of stuff when it comes to states that have passed things like cannabis legislation. And libertarians, we're of the mind that if there isn't a victim, there shouldn't be a crime. And so if somebody's, trying to get some medication to help themselves ease, say, glaucoma or, help ease the nausea when it comes to, the treatments, for cancer.
Chemotherapy.
When you're talking about some of those things, cannabis does help quite a bit with that, but the way the Attorney General is right now is he wants to crack down on individuals who are choosing those as options. And, Rand Paul actually
Federal Attorney General Sessions?
Correct. And so some of his nomination support have been questionable. Also, and I think some of it might be that he's just trying to play the game, because you got to kind of play a little bit of political chess, I guess you could call it, when you're sitting there, because if you want to get anything done, you have to possibly support something that you wouldn't normally support. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know, but I suspect some of it might be with some future aspirations, like
Some
maybe running for the...
trade-offs have to be made.
Mm-hmm. And that's also another thing when it comes to having somebody that's from a third party or even an independent that would be in the House or Senate, is that they don't have to quite give as much because they were literally given a mandate by their state that, hey, we support your idea, not a party idea, but your idea, because you're going to be one of the only ones there. And so they don't have to be as compromising in what they're doing. But when you're kind of in the party machine of the old two-party system, I mean, they even have some party leadership positions that are called whips. And their sole job is basically to keep you in line. Oh,
Well, that's what the whip stands for.
Mm-hmm. You want to be on this committee, you want to chair a committee, well, we need you to vote this way. And then if you don't, then you end up either put on a bad committee, maybe like some kind of sewer management kind of deal, or you end up, losing a leadership position. You can lose endorsement support. All kinds of things end up happening, and that's all done at the behest of the whip, called from by the majority leaders and the minority leaders. And so I get to kind of avoid that whole situation by, basically I would be the ultra minority leader and the ultra minority whip, and also the rank and file for the Libertarian Party if I were there. So I would literally be left with just having to listen to what Utah's telling me. And if they sent me to go and do some of the things that I talk about, then those are the things that I'm going to try to get done.
Should cannabis be legalized?
I think that honestly it should. When we look at some of the things, there are obviously some medical benefits that have been seen. A lot of it in the United States tends to be anecdotal, but there have been some studies done in other countries that are showing some actual promise that cannabis could unlock for a lot of individuals when it comes to pain management, post-traumatic stress disorder, various different anxiety disorders, and epilepsy has been a really big one too, where there's been shown a lot of promise with that. And ultimately, when I look at it recreationally, while I personally wouldn't do that, I don't really see how it's much different than somebody that chooses to go and grab a six-pack. That's not something that I'm going to go and do either. I'm not going to go and grab some Budweiser or anything like that on my weekend. I'm not going to go and grab a joint.
What about Bard's root beer?
I definitely enjoy some root beer, especially homemade. But when I look at it, it's, I'd rather have somebody vegging out on a couch eating a bag of Cheetos than, deal with some of the other issues that are tied in with continuing to fight the drug war. When we look at some of the gang violence that's involved, that's one of the things that really concerns me about continuing to keep cannabis illegal. People are literally dying, and in some cases, innocents in the crossfire.
It's actually a war that's going on.
Mm-hmm. And it takes a lot of power away from the gangs and the cartels by legalizing. And so I'd like to see it move to where we do have the option, and at a minimum, I think it should be decriminalized. I don't think that somebody who decides to enjoy, vegging out on their couch or whatever, should be thrown in jail and have their life ruined over something like that.
There are some downsides, I think, to the using it recreationally. Long term, I think it affects the brain, especially young people.
Oh, for sure. I mean, and the same can be said for alcohol. The same can be said for a lot of things. But as we learned in the past, when it came
to
to
Bard's root beer.
Not root beer. About the only thing you're going to get is if you get the one with sugar in it, is you're going to wind up looking a little bit like me if you drink too much of it. So you might end up with a little bit of a spare tire out front. But aside from that, not too many ill effects. But yeah, I'd like to see where people aren't being locked up for simply choosing to do something like that with their lives.
You're a veteran.
Mm-hmm.
Are veterans being treated fairly?
In all honesty, I don't believe the Veterans Affairs has been doing the job that they've been tasked to do.
This is just in Ogden.
Oh yeah.
Wasn't there something in the newspaper just the last week about?
Yeah, there was actually some dirty conditions up in the Salt Lake Medical Center where an individual went in for, I don't know if it was an appointment or an emergency visit, but they hadn't really been cleaning the rooms. I mean, that's something so basic that it really should be common sense, and it's not.
And the wait times are really long, I think.
When I was actually going through the process through the VA, it took about 3 years before they processed any of my disabilities.
3 years?
About 3 years.
You're kidding.
And the average wait time nationally, from what I've seen, is about 18 months.
Well, even just to get an appointment to see the doctor,
it can take months. One of the most common appointments that I personally have is a medication check. I've got some anxiety medications and things from being diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, and if I don't book it basically right after I finish the appointment that I just went into, it takes about 3 months to be seen again. And so they're obviously overstaffed, they're overburdened, and it just ends up hurting veterans. And what we've seen happen in cases like with Arizona, they actually are moving lists of veterans onto other lists just to make it look like the lists are moving, But in reality, they're still waiting to be seen. They're just waiting to be seen on a new list. And unfortunately, there hasn't been a lot done. Now, one of the things I would like to do if I were, able to introduce legislation would be to actually stop the medical side entirely, where instead of having to go to a specific medical center that's run by the Veterans Affairs, you would be given, similar to like a DoD card, a Department of Defense card, that has your disability information on it or whatever, and then you take it to any hospital or any clinic. So for me, I would literally just have to drive down the street from my house about a mile, as opposed to having to drive out to Salt Lake about 40 minutes away. For somebody that's in St. George, they'd be able to head, to the hospital here as opposed to having to go to Salt Lake for some of the specialty care. And what we see, if that actually ended up happening, is one, we wouldn't have to maintain these facilities and we could sell the assets. Now, obviously, companies like Intermountain or Mountain Star, they would be able to come in and buy those, ones that are located here in Utah or some other, medical group. And we could use that money to actually start paying down the national debt. And then veterans would be able to get care wherever, and it would just be a simple process of getting your disability rating with the VA instead of having to also get your medical care through them.
Got a minute and 30 seconds left. What's your final word?
My final word would just be to give third parties a chance, whether it's myself or somebody else that's on the ballot. Look into the candidates that are running to represent you. And if you do want to give me a chance, my website is Bowden4senate.com, and that's the number 4, not the word 4.
Sounds like an exciting thing you're doing.
Well, it definitely is. We've been having a lot of fun. We've been able to have a lot of conversations with thousands of Utahns, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Well, that's the important thing, the people.
Most definitely. And I think more than just the speaking part is the ears. I mean, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we're supposed to listen twice as much as we speak.
And then act.
Most definitely.
Well, Craig Bowden, thanks for being with us.
Not a problem. It was my pleasure.
This is Lane Rano from the campus of Dixie State University. Thank you for being with us on A Story to Tell.